Pickle Hitler dismembered body parts, giving poison candy to a child, an ice skater turned bad, an image that inspired a serial killer, and more. Here's 22 mind-boggling comic book covers that most collectors don't know exist. At first glance, this cover looks pretty normal for WW2. It's the hero, the Black Terror, punching a Nazi in the face. But look closer, that soldier is injecting a candy bar with poison. Just outside, you can see a friendly officer passing out that tainted candy to a child. Let's move from figurative Nazi monsters to literal monster Nazis. Here you see Amazing Man punching a green Nazi monster in the upper thigh. Across all World War II themed comic books, I believe that this one says, "Up yours to Hitler," better than any other cover. We're talking about Marvel Mystery Comics number 46. It's often referred to as the Pickle Hitler cover. You could spend all day uncovering the action-packed details, the throne of bones, the vulture on the back, and the worm wriggling out of the Fuhrer's ear. By the way, at the end of this video, I'll reveal the values of all of these books. Some of them cost just a few $100s, and others cost as much as a nice car. Fight Comics number 32. It appears that this Cobra Commander looking Nazi dude is surprised by the explosion. Let's zoom in a bit, shall we? Severed arms and even a severed head can be seen shot up into the air. No zooming is necessary for Tomb of Terror number 15. Lee Elias shows why he's the best at drawing blown up and disintegrated faces. I've always been curious why there are mechanical parts like a spring and a nut flying out of the face alongside the flesh and teeth. If anybody knows, leave it in the comment box. The next one may surprise you because the artist Steve Ditko is best known for his work on the very early issues of Amazing Spider-Man, but even he has a darker side. This is Racket Squad in action. The villainous dude throws a bomb out of his car into a convenience store and takes 2 children down. Let's move on to some classier art, shall we? Got a swordfish giving you grief? Consider putting it into a headlock. What a masterpiece by Lou Fine. Y'all know I love underwater covers, so let's do another one. This is Scoop Comics number 2. It is super tough, only 15 on CGC Census. I love it because of that black backdrop and these bright colors on top. Let's look at perhaps the strangest / most elegant cover ever done. We're talking about Strange Tears number 4 by William Edgren. And you might be thinking, how in the world did this art end up on a comic book? It turns out that there were some execs from publisher St. John who were walking down the street in New York City and they noticed this art display. It was actually by Edgren. They negotiated with him a bit and said, hey, if we paid you a few bucks, would you let us use your image on our comic books? And he ended up saying yes to this book and to others. Speaking of St. John, their art director, Matt Baker, happened to be the finest good girl artist of all time. Here's 7 Seas number 4. Perfection. Beautiful and strong. This is my wife's favorite book. I gotta show one more Baker book. This is Cinderella number 25. It took me a little while for this book to appeal to me, but now every time I see it, I get more and more enamored. I mean, just look at that expression. This one's a little more lighthearted. It is the famous Ginger 4 convertible cover. She's telling one suitor that she won't go out with him because another suitor is noble and a gentleman. But the thought bubble reveals it all is actually because he's driving a new convertible. If those girls are good, the next ones are definitely bad. Giant Comics Edition number 12. Here we have a suggestive cover. Every caption is more lurid than the one before. Wild desire for romantic thrills threatened to ruin my reputation. The next book has one of the weirdest backstories in all of the hobby, featuring a real-life ice skater, her angry father, and a lawsuit. In the 1940s, one of Canada's top ice skaters was Marty Collins. Then she appeared on the cover of this book wearing this outfit. The interior pages contained letters suggesting an inappropriate relationship between her father and her. As you might imagine, Marty's dad wasn't too happy and he filed a lawsuit saying, hey, you gotta remove these letters from this book. The lawsuit was successful, by the way. 3 years later, the same image appears on a comic book, Reformed Schoolgirls. I will say, she does look pretty darn cool. I think she would have made a nice match for James Dean. Here's another of my favorite covers. Her lame boyfriend is getting tagged as a rat by the mob. She's firing right back and using him as a human shield. Often, horror and crime books were intended to shock and awe, but some were clever and artful. Punch Comics number 12 is simply one of the best covers of all time. The skull dominates the cover, but when you look a little closer, you realize there's a story in those hollow orifices. Speaking of which, there's a minor detail in one of the eye sockets that very few people have noticed. Oh yeah, and supposedly this is one of Nick Cage's favorite books. At one time, he owned many copies of it. Mysterious Traveler number 1 is a relatively obscure book. It shouldn't be. To me, it is the coolest train cover to ever be on a comic. Mysterious Adventures number 15. If you ever wondered what happened to Bill, here's your answer. He's become a bowling ball, and a surprisingly accurate one at that. Then there are some covers that are flat out weird, including Daredevil 11. No, we're not talking about that Daredevil, we're talking about the Golden Age Daredevil. It was the twisted mind of Charles Bureau that came up with this unusual torture scene. You've got this hunchback dude missing an eye who is taking a feather and tickling a woman's foot. Rifleman 10 at first blush looks innocent. You have a cowboy and a boy and they're working on a project. Then you look a little closer. Let's move on, shall we? Roly Poly 14. This is one of the strangest comic books ever created. First, that name, Roly Poly, that's kind of funny. Then you have that decapitation cover with that hilarious caption. Gore blimey, it's a bleeding Ed. How about that comic that inspired a serial killer? In 1970, the San Francisco Chronicle received this letter from the Zodiac Killer. Notice these words: by fire, by gun, by knife, by rope. Some detectives connected this unusual wording to an obscure comic book from the 1950s, Tim Holt number 30. Check out the Wheel of Death. Fire, gun, knife, rope, all there. Coincidence or more? What do you think? By the way, in a fine 6.0 condition, Tim Holt number 30 will set you back about $3,000. Let's go back to the other books we talked about, and I'll put a price on them in the same condition, in a 6.0. There's no bargain bin here, but 3 of the books can be had for under $3,000. Racket Squad in Action number 12 comes in at a mere $300. Rifleman 10 can be had for $600. Mysterious Traveler number 1 can probably be had for just a hair under $1,000 at a 6.0, but if you see one for about that price, please don't buy it. I've been waiting to get that book forever. About a third of the books run in the $1,000 to $5,000 range, and another third run from the $5,000 to $20,000 range. We have 5 books that are $20,000 or more, starting with Cinderella Love number 25. Pickle Hitler Marvel Mystery number 46 is pretty expensive as well. Giant Comics Edition number 12, $32,000. Amazing Man number 22 is going to set you back about $40,000. Then the top book is Punch Comics number 12. In fact, a 5.5 copy sold relatively recently for $90,000. Recall that I said that Nick Cage was a big fan of this book? Well, the copy that sold happened to be one of Nick Cage's copies. You can see in the CGC notes it says from the collection of Nick Cage. Speaking of Nick Cage, did you know that he once owned one of the best copies of Action Comics number 1 in the world? It was stolen from him, and the story is just ridiculous. And if you want to learn about it, check out this video. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you around real soon.